Okay, the final part of the April Q&A series, part 3. It was part 1 and part 2, which makes sense. Go back and watch them if you haven't, but of course watch this one first. And yeah, we're wrapping it up. There's a few more interesting questions that we have to give answers to. So
make you sound like such a chore. Like, oh no,
no.
We have to answer all these questions.
I'm saying we did part 1 and 2, and then we were like, there's just more great questions from our wonderful audience that need answers.
You need to get the energy out. There's more great questions. We're super keen on getting into these questions.
Are we an entertainment channel now?
Oh, yeah.
Hi, guys. Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Today, we are answering questions. But before we do, today's sponsor spot is brought to you by Thermal Grizzly and the new Duranaut High Performance Thermal Paste. Duranaut offers extreme long-term stability combined with outstanding thermal conductivity, and this has been achieved through a specially engineered silicon oil combined with aluminium microparticles and zinc oxide nanoparticles of various shapes. Duranaut isn't electrically conductive and won't harden over time. For best performance, you'll want to apply a very thin layer, and to help with this, included is the TG Spatula Pro. The spatula's revised design allows for increased pressure during application, making it easy to spread a thin, even layer of Duranaut. So for more information, please check the link in the video description.
If AMD can port some elements of FSR4 to older generations, should they call it a version of FSR4, maybe FSR4 Lite, or should they just call it another update to FSR3? I guess my opinion on this is sort of, if it's in any way worse than FSR4, probably don't call it FSR4. My thinking there is that you don't want people, let's say on an RX 6000 series GPU, using FSR4 Lite for the first time and thinking that that is indicative of the full experience, because you really want to try and get people interested in upgrading to new Radeon graphics cards. So specifically, it's maybe less of like an issue with old Radeon owners, but let's say it's available for GeForce cards. You don't want someone with a RTX 3070 using FSR4 Lite version, testing it out and saying, the quality here is not great. You know, it's just not really giving me that DLSS experience. Like, I've heard about FSR4. Supposedly it's closer to DLSS, but FSR4 Lite, it's not really it. It's not really giving me what I want. So if that's the case, like, that's just going to hurt the AMD brand. And I believe that's what has happened with things like FSR3. Your RTX owners have been able to access FSR3. They're seeing the results. They're like, it's not really the quality I'm after. DLSS is obviously a lot better. And that stops people from moving across to Radeon because they're going to be forced to use the crappy other version. So I would think that if it is in any way different, that it should just have a different name, which is kind of what we've been going on about for other things. If something is ultimately different, it should probably have a different name. So maybe if they can get the full version of FSR4 quality on older GPUs, but just doesn't run as well, then you could justify calling that FSR4. But if the quality is degraded, then FSR 3.5 or something like that, or just anything that makes it very clear that this is a better version of FSR3, but it isn't the full version that you will get on a 9000 series card, I think would work the best. So again, I'm still not sure whether they will port any part of the technology back. They've left that open, not really commenting or committing either way. Obviously, FSR4 as it stands right now requires the new cards. Not sure. We'll see what happens there on that one. Don't know what to expect, to be honest. Since you've now reviewed the 8GB RTX 5060 Ti, what are your thoughts on AMD doing the same thing with the RX 9060 XT? For example, having 16 and 8GB models. I'm guessing this is because there are currently rumors that is what's happening.
Yeah, I'm not sure the rumors are for them to do the exact same thing. That would be highly disappointing if that is the case, and we'll obviously have to roast AMD as well, so that's going to be a fun little video series. The previous generation, they had the RX 7600, so the non-XT, which was the 8GB model, and they had the 7600 XT, which was the 16GB model. So if you wanted 16GB, you had to get the XT. They are similar in names. They're both 7600 series products, but we get 4070, 4070 Ti, and 7900 XT and XTX. So I think that part of it's fine. I think it's when you start adding, the VRAM capacity to the end that doesn't necessarily tell someone there's a different VRAM capacity.
And the 7600 XT versus 7600, the XT model was also faster, because it was clocked higher.
It was
a different configuration.
It was a slightly different configuration, but it was distinct from the other one. So that's the main sort of thing we want to focus in on here. Whereas the problem I have with products like the RTX 4060 Ti and the 5060 Ti is that they're called the RTX 5060 Ti, but there's two very different configurations. Now, if it was a situation where, look, we would probably recommend you get the 8GB model because, it runs all the games. We can't find any examples where we're even getting close to saturating the VRAM buffer. So probably buy that. It's not worth paying a premium for this 16GB model. If that was the situation, which that has been the situation in the past when we've had cards with two different VRAM configurations, then it would be fine. But the 8GB model is pretty broken in a lot of very reasonable configurations today. So you buy it today, 2 years from now, it's going to be very bad. So that's the main issue we have with that product. Now, if AMD release a 9060 XT with 8GB and 16GB, then yeah, different discussion. But if it's like the non-XT is the 8GB card and the XT is the 16GB card, then less of an issue. Obviously, we're still not wrapped with 8GB GPUs, 8GB discrete GPUs in 2025, unless they're absolutely dirt cheap. They'd have to be maximum of $200, but realistically probably less than that, and that's obviously not going to happen, so they shouldn't exist, period, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, if it's a situation where there's a 9060 XT 16GB model, obviously no problems there. And if there's a cut down 9060, like let's say the RX 9060 is the lowest model that AMD is going to make, that's an 8GB card and it's very cheap. So it might be cut down in all sorts of ways, like less cores and shader units and it's clocked lower, whatever the case may be, to make it a much cheaper version, more akin to an RX 6600, which was selling for below $200. It's not as much of an issue because then, as we've consistently said, if it's a very low price below a certain threshold, it's the lowest card in the lineup, then there are going to have to be some cutbacks to achieve certain prices, and 8GB is probably okay in those scenarios. The issue is more what you've been saying, same sort of configurations or same names, or it's simply overpriced. But if they go down the 9060 XT having 8 and 16 gig, and they're thinking about doing this right now as it sits here in April of 2025, my message to AMD is very simple. Just cancel the 8 gig card. Just get rid of it. Don't make it. Don't produce it. Don't give it to the AIBs. It's not too late. It's literally, you could cancel it the day before it's released. It is not too late to cancel that card, because I think that it would hurt the reputation of the Radeon brand if they go ahead with an 8GB GPU that will be destroyed in the same way as 5060 Ti 8GB. Just people will dump on that thing. So there's just no point making it. And again, like AMD's got an opportunity here, right? Well, it's not even an if. We know for a fact Nvidia are making a 5060 8GB for $300. We know for a fact the 5060 Ti 8GB exists and is $380. So they've got an opportunity here to just not make an 8GB card in those price ranges. Just not doing it at all. Like any 8, as we've said earlier in this Q&A series, any 8GB configuration with a 128-bit memory bus can be a 16GB card. There's no technical reason, no limitations. It just simply can have more VRAM. And so if I was in AMD's shoes and I'm thinking about capitalizing on the lack of good quality mainstream GPUs, I want to build market share, build the goodwill of gamers, because gamers will want to jump on brands that are doing what gamers want to do, then the simple thing to do is make sure that all the cards have enough VRAM for modern gaming. And there's examples they can look at to see how those products will be received. They just need to look at the Intel Arc B580. Intel were nowhere. No one was buying Arc GPUs. No one was interested. No one was rushing out to buy them on launch until they delivered the news that they were going to sell a 12GB GPU that with decent performance for $250. Then suddenly there's all this interest, all this hype and excitement, and unfortunately Intel weren't able to capitalize on that because it seems like they didn't really make enough. But just the reception at that launch was amazing. Intel would have been over the moon at the reception that they got to a card, because people were ignoring all the driver stuff that was the previous issues with Intel cards, all the lack of features, maybe some issues running certain games. All of that went away when they announced the $250 12GB GPU. So the blueprint is there. The blueprint is there. All they have to do is not release an 8 gigabyte GPU at that price. And it cannot be more simple. Cancel the card if it exists. Don't release it. Go with the 16 gigabyte card only, make it a really nice price, and go from there. But there is one thing we talked about in the podcast recently, which was how we believe the 8 and 16 gig 5060 Ti strategy is a bit of Nvidia hedging their bets. If whenever someone talks about the 5060 Ti 16 gigabyte, then goes and looks at a retailer, they will see a $50 cheaper model that is there. You search from low to high, there it is. There's the crappy 8 gig card, when everyone else may be talking about the 16 gig model. Now, if AMD can't get their card below $380, for example, then Nvidia's strategy has worked pretty much it's played out exactly how they want it to play out. They have this low price card that sucks to undercut the price of the AMD model. So, for example, if a 9060 XT 16 gigabytes is $400, they're straight up being undercut by a garbage product, and they're riding on the reputation.
It's certainly worked to a degree, but I think for this generation it'll come back to bite them, because if you can get a 16 gigabyte, say 9060 XT or whatever, for roughly the same price as the 8 gigabyte model, there isn't going to be too many reviewers and PC enthusiasts around the world that are going to be recommending the 8 gigabyte card over the 16 gigabyte card.
Well, no one's recommending the 8 gig card anyway. I think it's more for casual gamers. Like, for example...
Yeah, it's the trap. It's the trap we've been talking about. But I think more that the damage that does to the 5060 Ti when you see a lot of reviews... Because at this point, you've got a lot of people saying the 5060 Ti at the MSRP looks like being a decent value product. Like, people weren't raving about it, but they weren't slamming it. It's like, this is... Right now, at this price point, this is a good product. But then it goes the other way when you get a heap of people saying... the 8 gigabyte 5060 Ti is trash, don't buy it, get the 9060 XT instead, then that sort of tarnishes the whole 5060 Ti.
Yeah, that is...
It goes the other way a bit. Whereas they haven't had... All I'm getting at is this situation hasn't existed before because the RX 7600 series was also kind of crap.
That's true.
So AMD really have a chance here to release a good series, and that'll take care of the rest, like the 9070 and 9070 XT did. So we'll see.
I think my only concern would be, let's say the 9060 XT 16 gigabyte is $400. With that trap set up there, if we're all talking about the same range of prices, and it turns out that the 5060 Ti 8 gigabyte is just the cheapest in that price range, that is going to tempt the most basic everyday customers and consumers into buying the cheapest card in that price range.
Well, they did do 16 gigabytes previously for a lot less than that, so...
Yeah, so I would be hoping something that would be very successful is, obviously making the 16 gig card no more or the same price as the 5060 Ti 8 gigabyte. That obviously would just immediately remove that problem, because then anyone comparing the two would be going to reviews and seeing how they compare. So, again, I don't see a reason for AMD to hedge their bets that way. I don't think they need to anchor the market or do anything like that by creating a lower cost 8 gig card just to counter other products. I think that doesn't make a lot of sense. Just release the one model, price it well, and I think it'll really take care of itself. If all gamers are talking about things like, how good is this 16 gig model? Because it's, the 9060 XT has enough VRAM. We're not talking about the other model because it doesn't exist. There's only one model. I think that would be a really successful move, and I think gamers would be very receptive to that and would get lots of positive reception, even pre-reviews and things like that. So there's just an opportunity there. I don't see the reason to make an 8 gig card. It would have to be so much cheaper. It's pointless. So that's the opportunity. We'll see what happens next month. Do you think Nvidia should relaunch the RTX 3060 12 gigabyte? With the added board cost of the clamshelled 16 gigabyte design, it seems very unlikely either them or AMD could reach a similar price point with any new 8 gigabyte plus card. So there's a few questions here, and this is one of them, about what are some solutions so that we no longer get 8 gigabyte, 5060s and that sort of thing. So I looked up some of the specs and numbers that may play into this. So the RTX 3060 was 276 square millimeters of Samsung 8N silicon. It also had 12 gigabytes of GDDR6 and at a launch price of $329 US. So that's about $400 today after inflation, which is a lot more than, a 5060 today. So a theoretical RTX 5050, so we're talking about like a cheap model here. You're looking at maybe like 140, and I'm bringing this up because a 3060 is slower than a 5060 based on all accounts. The 5060 is likely to be around 30% faster, excluding the VRAM issues, obviously. So if you're talking about the same sort of performance, you'd be looking at like an RTX 5050. That could be something around 140 square millimeters of TSMC 4N. So, the 5060 is about 190 square millimeters, so smaller die. 8 gigabytes of GDDR7 or 6, depending on the rumors. What they price it at, like $200 maybe, $250 with the cut down in performance. So you're talking about like a card from 5 years ago that cost $400 effectively at launch compared to a $200 model now. Could they sell a much larger die with more GDDR6 memory for this? Like, is that going to cost them the same to make?
Mm-hmm.
Like, probably not. Like, for example, is the TSMC 4A node, does that double the price? Because if you're making half the die size, the silicon would have to cost double for it to be the same sort of cost as bringing back the 3060. I'm not sure the economics work that way. And then on top of that, Nvidia would be saving money creating an 8 gigabyte 5050 because it's 8 gigabytes. It's less chips than 12 gigabytes. So I'm just like, ideally, they would just re-release the 3060 12 gigabyte instead of a 5050. It's most likely would be a better product, but economically, they're not going to want to make a low margin bringing back of an old GPU. And on top of that, they can't market things like multi-frame generation. The 30 series doesn't support frame generation at all. They can't market any of the other new features, the new tensor cores and ray tracing and, I don't know, AI stuff, whatever that the new cards can do, because the 3060 can't do any of that stuff. It can do ray tracing, but you know what I mean. They've got newer generation cores, right? So this always comes up, the whole let's bring back an old model and re-release it. Running the numbers, I just can't see that working.
Well, it's not even that, though. It's this, I get why people are looking at ways to solve NVIDIA's problem, but NVIDIA's problem's like man-made. Like,
that's true. Yeah.
There's not really a problem here that needs to be solved. They could just make a 16 gigabyte RTX 5060 Ti as they have, and then not make a dodgy trap model with just half as much VRAM that kind of doesn't work. And they could add more VRAM to other it's 2025. It's crazy that we're like talking about 16 gigabytes of VRAM being a lot.
Yeah, I know.
You would have never, if you go back to Pascal and you're like, so in the year 2025, how much VRAM do you think mainstream cards would have? And if I said to you, it's probably still going to be like 8 gigabytes of VRAM. So it's just, it's an artificially created problem, I guess, is what I'm saying. Like, it doesn't need some sort of external solution to try and help them solve it. It's just add more VRAM is the solution. Is it possible to mix VRAM modules on a GPU? So, for example, instead of 6 2 gigabyte modules on the 5070, we could have 4 2 gigabyte and 2 3 gigabyte modules for a combined 14 gigabyte, which I think would be enough. There'd definitely be some technical issues in doing that and probably some performance related problems for addressing that and how it would work. But again, I get the angle you're coming at here. It's a reasonable enough question, but it's really a question that you shouldn't have to ask or even be pondering, because what you do is you add enough VRAM.
You make all the chips the 3 gigabyte modules if that's the option.
Or you clamshell it or whatever it is you have to do. But basically, again, it's you guys being frustrated with not enough VRAM, because it's quite evident now that these GPUs don't have enough VRAM, really now and certainly for the future. The solution is to add more VRAM. Like, it's not like we're sitting here going, wow, we're stuck at 8 gigabytes. It's not like some of these technical hurdles that we've run into with PC hardware where it's just really difficult to overcome. It's not difficult technically. It's not difficult financially. It's very feasible and it's very easy to do. And these solutions have been in place for a long time and they've been executed upon for many generations now. So,
yeah, like in this question, I think they're asking about mixing and matching the different modules.
That's
theoretically, it shouldn't cost them that much more. Like, we're talking dollars to go from the 12 gigabytes to 18 gigabytes. If they doubled the memory, it would be costing them somewhere in the range of $30 to $40 of chips to get you 24 gigabytes on a 5070 class product. So it's not a significant cost. And I get that this question is probably coming from the point of, well, they can save a bit of money by using the cheaper 2 gigabyte modules plus the more expensive 3 gigabyte modules. I think that would fly if we're talking about the overall production cost of the card being quite close to the sale price. So if a 5070 was costing, let's say, $500 US to manufacture, and the margin on the card was only $50 or something, then yeah, it would be much more difficult to clamshell the memory and make it a viable product. It would probably have to be more expensive. But that's not the case. These cards have a huge, huge margin on them. We're talking above 50% margin on these products. We know companies don't eat into their margins. Fair enough, they're companies. But that shouldn't be an excuse for making a bad quality product. The first goal, make the product good, then worry about the margins. And not so much with the 5070, but certainly the 8 gigabyte models, they just haven't done that. So, yeah. So this is another similar configuration question. This one is asking about any thoughts on if Nvidia had done a 12 gigabyte 96-bit 5060 for this, for say $330, not bothered with the 8 gigabyte 5060 Ti. It seems to me that 96-bit 12 gigabyte would be a better balanced 5060 than a 128-bit 8 gigabyte part is looking to be, given the terrible 5060 Ti 8 gigabyte. So again, I think what Steve was saying earlier obviously plays into this again. Just give more VRAM on the same configuration, 16 gigabytes. I think if we're talking though about 96-bit, because I see this come up a fair bit, just drop the memory bit, but they can't do it because 96-bit is too slim. So the RTX 4060, which had 8 gigabytes of GDDR6 on a 128-bit bus, used 17 gigabits per second chips. That had 272 gigabytes per second of bandwidth. Now, if you had an RTX 5060 with 12 gigabytes of GDDR7 on a 96-bit bus using 28 gigabits per second chips, because G7 is a lot faster, you're going to have 336 gigabytes per second of bandwidth. So it'll still be higher than what you would have gotten from a 4060, despite the fact the bus width is very narrow. That will still be quite a downgrade from what you'd see on a 5060 Ti, which has 448 gigabytes per second. They could probably get up to maybe 360 gigabytes per second with the 30 gigabits per second chips they use for the 5080, which are maybe a little bit more expensive. But it's not as crazily not viable as it might appear to be. 96-bit is obviously very restrictive. Probably not the best solution as instead of just giving you 16 gigabytes on 128-bit, which is the obvious solution. But it's not like it would be less memory bandwidth than previous generation products. It'd really be about the balance of how much memory bandwidth does this architecture and card need. I think the key takeaway, it's that would be a preferable configuration because, again, yes, the bandwidth isn't the key issue, it's the capacity. Yes, it is, 100%. So if we're talking about a world where there's two options, 96-bit 12 gigabyte or 128-bit 8 gigabyte, 96-bit 12 gigabyte is the better version. Mm-hmm. I think what we've been saying, though, is that 128-bit 16 gigabyte should be viable in this performance class anyway. Mm-hmm. And so compromising it down to 96-bit shouldn't be required. But if they're going to go either way, maybe cutting down the memory bus that far is a thing. You have to look into things like the 5060. The 5060 is probably going to perform similarly to a 4060 Ti. So how much memory bandwidth that card can't quite remember. Probably similar to the 4060. So provided there's enough bandwidth and things to power the cores that are provided in that card, there really shouldn't be too much of an issue having done that. Mm-hmm. So I know people bring it up and then it gets dismissed as being ridiculous. It doesn't sound overly ridiculous to me, but again, just design the cards better and then you wouldn't have to bother coming up with solutions like that. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's a good idea for someone who wants to get into PC gaming to hunt for a pre-built PC instead of trying to build one themselves, considering the current GPU shortage as a factor? I'm pretty conflicted on this one. I would always advocate for building your own PC because it's a great skill to have. It literally changed my life building my first PC. I definitely wouldn't be sitting here today if I hadn't have done that. So that's way back in high school. It's a long time ago, Tim. We won't talk about how long ago, will we? But it was a long time ago. So yeah, life-changing experience for me building my first computer. It's also really helpful, especially if you are really passionate about PC gaming, want to do a lot of it, and
Yeah, because if something does go wrong with the computer, you built it, you can probably work out what that thing is rather than having no idea about how it all works and no idea where to start with diagnosing it. You have to send it off to a shop and wait for them. And pretty cool if you can just, you've worked out what it could be. Like, is it the power supply that's failing, or the memory, or is it just something that needs updating? You can do that yourself. Might take a matter of hours or less, and you're back gaming rather than setting the computer off and waiting, I don't know, 1 to 2 weeks for it to be solved. Who knows? So yeah, it's just a really good skill to acquire. And I think these days it's surprising, I don't know if alarming's the word, but surprising how many younger people really have no idea how to put a computer together or use it. I mean, I'm just talking about the people I know, so it could vary depending on where you are and who you know. But I guess when I was growing up and starting to learn for the first time, it was a skill that I kind of thought everyone would acquire and have. It'd be just like a basic survival type skill, like knowing how to use and fix a computer. But it's gone the other way, where it's become so mainstream now. It's become so simplified that, yeah, people don't really know what works under the hood. So yeah, I mean, the thing with pre-builts though, you can get good deals on them. They are all put together and should work. And, again, a local company like PC Case Gear do a great job of supporting their pre-built systems.
You get some really cool looking ones now too. Back in our day when we were buying PCs for the first
boxes.
time, it was like, your local Dell was just a beige box and it looked like garbage. Whereas now there's so many boutique options that do really nice looking
quality
versions.
PCs, generally using good hardware. It varies depending on who you go to, but generally good hardware, well put together, looks good.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, a lot of those pre-built makers like a PC Case and other retailers actually look at reviews for parts, like Hardware Unboxed reviews, Gamers Nexus reviews, to decide which of the motherboards, cases, power supplies and things like that they order in bulk. So the products end up being quality.
Yeah, I don't want to say that you have to build your own PC. You can buy a pre-built and then upgrade that and tinker with it and stuff. So you still can get all those skills and learn that way. I think for me, it's, like I said, it's a tough one because building my first computer is what got me here today and changed everything that I was planning on doing. So it's just a great experience. But again, you can get that with a pre-built still. It's just a sort of slower, maybe. It's like going in the shallow end and tiptoeing towards the deep end, because it can be. I think my very first computer I ever built, and mind you, computers were significantly more difficult to put together and get working back then. I think it took me like 2 days to get it sorted out working because we had some memory problems and stuff like that. But after 2 days, it was up and running, and it was great beyond that point. And yeah, just an awesome experience.
I think these days, obviously the supply thing is a factor. You can't just go buy a graphics card at the moment, whereas a lot of pre-builts do have some supply of those things. What I'd be looking for is, are the pre-built makers really scalping you on the graphics card prices or not? Because if they're just selling you a system, you price it up, you figure out all the components that go into it, and you come to a number of what they're charging you for that graphics card. Let's say you're looking at a 5080 system. If they're charging you $1,400 US for a 5080, that's basically the price you can go buy one for right now. And so it's not really solving the supply issue if the pre-built is just offering the same experience as buying on the DIY market. But theoretically, a pre-built maker, especially some of the larger ones, should be able to get those cards at the actual normal MSRP, non-scalped, non-distributor price. Theoretically, of course, it's not the case in a lot of regions where they still have to go through the same channels. But theoretically, that is possible, especially from a major company, like I'm talking Dell, Lenovo, which I'm not necessarily advocating to buy from those brands, but they definitely should be getting 5080s for the MSRP because they often make their own cards. So that's something that I'd be considering. Obviously, if it turns out that buying a Dell with a 5080 is way cheaper than going to a store and buying a 5080, may make sense to do that. Of course, you have to also factor in sometimes Dell systems have weird components on the inside, not as upgradable. So you have to do your research and all that sort of thing. But that's what I'd be looking for. If you're buying a pre-built and they're just rolling you on the graphics card price anyway because of low supply, that's bad. Probably stick more to what we've been saying. Skill up. Make sure you're getting the pre-built knowledge. Make sure you're getting the build-it-your-own PC knowledge. Do it that way. But yeah, pre-builts, you can get a good deal on some of these supply constraint scenarios where they find ways to get you the components for a much more reasonable price. So that's what I'd be looking for.
All right, Tim, I think we've had a similar question to this probably about 10 times, but you've added it here, so we'll answer it. It's probably got a lot of upvotes and people are always interested.
I can't remember the last time we answered this, actually, probably a few years ago.
Yeah, look, it might have been. I don't know, I'm just whinging. I've been doing the job too long. It's breaking me. What would you both be doing today if you hadn't started with unboxing hardware and reviewing tech and games? So I think this goes beyond just the YouTube channel because I've been doing this job for over 20 years now. So it's not, it long predates the YouTube channel. So if I hadn't have gone down this PC tech path to begin with, I mean, I would have almost certainly done like a trade. So I'd probably be like an electrician, something like that. Perfectly fine job. And I'm glad I'm not doing it because it's pretty hard work. I do a bit of that stuff from time to time. And yeah, it's not the easiest of jobs. So hats off to the people that do that sort of stuff. But yeah, I probably would have done some sort of trade. I probably would have eventually started my own business because I'm that way inclined. So I mean, these days I'd see myself building like custom PC game stations, desks and all that sort of stuff because I love doing that. So maybe I would have, done that, and it probably would have resulted in a YouTube channel and stuff like that anyway, because I do like hands-on technical stuff as well. So it probably would have been, desks unboxed.
So yeah, I mean, I went to uni for 5 years and did electrical engineering. So I've got a master's degree in electrical engineering. I would have probably become an electrical engineer. So you never know how the job market would have gone back then when I finished that. But if I hadn't, I was obviously like you doing a bit of work at TechSpot and written stuff, not necessarily as much in the PC space. It was more phones and that sort of thing back then.
We might have ended up working together. You'd be in the office and I'd be the field grunt.
Well, potentially. But so I'm assuming that like if I'd given that up and went down the path that I went to uni for, which is exactly what I was planning to do when I went to uni, otherwise I wouldn't have done it, then yeah, I'd just probably be an engineer somewhere in Australia working on trains or something. Because if I think about what are all the people I knew from uni doing now, a lot of them are working on public transport systems or the defense stuff that we do here in Australia. So something like that. I've always thought that, my dream job outside of YouTube would be working on air crash investigations. So when you're an engineer, you can go into pathways like that. I'm not sure I could, because I'm not a US citizen, probably can't work at the NTSB, which does a lot of the major air crash investigations. But I've always loved watching those shows and it's kind of like I imagine the job's actually not like this. I imagine there's a lot of paperwork and a lot of other crap that goes into jobs like that. But it seems very much like you're piecing together a puzzle, like we kind of do some investigative work here, right? Like investigating how good products are is basically what our job is. Investigating how a plane falls out of the sky because of some technical fault to it, piecing together things, going out and finding out information. That really appeals to me. So if I wasn't doing this, that would sort of be a goal for me. Obviously, I think I prefer doing my current job. It's maybe working as an air crash investigator, there's not as much of the sort of public-facing work, so you're not under as much scrutiny as maybe you are on a YouTube channel. So maybe that would be nice, bit lower, more anonymous of a job. But yeah, obviously I love doing YouTube, so I'm not really thinking about leaving this and going off and doing that. So, but yeah, that'd just be a really interesting job for me. I think investigation, I'd be doing some sort of investigative work outside of this if I could.
Detective Tim. It always whenever you talk about that, it reminds me of, it was Computex last year, wasn't it? What was that thing? I forget now, that AI where you were trying to get someone to tell you their room number so you could get
it was Nvidia Ace.
Yeah,
the Ace
what was
demo.
the goal again, the Ace demo?
I was trying to get their key card or something, or go back to their room to get the information in the demo, and I was just asking them the stupidest questions.
I wish we had a film of that, because it's one of the funniest things. But yeah, Tim was...
I was trying to break it. I was trying to see how Ace really worked, and it held up to some degree, although it did sidetrack it a little bit.
Yeah, you got it in a loop.
You got it
into a loop. But anyway, that was a lot of fun, but I'm getting it sidetracked now, but I wish we had a film of that because it was great.
So yeah, anyway, that's sort of a different, you sort of think about sliding doors moments. What could have happened if I went into engineering instead of taking a punt on YouTube? Because yeah, back then, like, it probably was short-term better financially to become an engineer at that time. So just decided, I think hardware unboxed is something in this business. Let's give it a go.
I remember when you'd nearly finished your degree and you were sort of interested in coming on part-time. And then I was like, well, you can come on full-time if you want. We can make it work. And then yeah, master's degree and then becomes a YouTuber. What a waste.
Well, I kind of do think about that. I'm like, I've got that degree somewhere and I can see it. I put in all that work to get it. Don't really use it, if I'm totally honest. I mean,
you're paying it off for the rest of your life?
Well, yeah, potentially. I mean, I think...
I won't talk about that.
I won't talk about that. It's maybe on the more depressing end. But, to be fair, though, you do learn... Obviously, there's a lot of math involved with engineering I don't use in my day-to-day life anymore, but you do learn quick problem solving. It's probably the thing that I have taken away from doing the degree is you become a very, very good researcher and problem solver and finding out things, finding the solutions to problems and not stumbling around, fluffing around. Because I've seen other people try and solve, non-engineering types try and solve problems quickly, and it can be challenging for other people. So I find that just really natural now. So I think that's helped with some of the things that we do here. But just the actual knowledge of, putting together PCBs is not really something I have used. So Not yet.
You never know.
If you get me in front of Altium Designer, I don't know where that's still a thing because it was like 10 years ago, but I used that software. I know how to use MATLAB back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
So if people still use that software, I feel your pain because I do know how to use it, but don't use it anymore. But,
bit rusty.
But yeah, I won't think about the financial implications of doing that. And yeah.
All right, low energy Steve here. That's it. Q&A series over. I'm not doing it. I can't do that, Tim.
You're not a Mr. Beast, are you?
No.
You don't have that in you?
No.
Oh, I don't really have it in me either. It's
So you were just mocking me. It was a bit hypocritical of you.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's okay. That's okay. I think the people, the commenters will forgive me.
All right.
At least I hope. Leave your forgiveness in the comments below. Anyway, what else is to say in this episode? End of the episode.
Interesting month. Interested to see what next month brings. So
it will be a Computex next month.
That's right. So it will be a Computex Q&A series next month. So we'll do the same thing. We'll just be filming it in Taiwan.
It'll be outside. It'll be 30 degrees and humid. We'll be sweating like crazy. So that'll be a great time.
I actually can't wait. It's going to be awesome.
Last month we did. Last time at Computex we did it by a pool, didn't we? So that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Maybe this month we should get in the pool.
Maybe that'll be warranted.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching. I'm your host, Steve.
I'm your host, Tim.
See you next time.